I had spent 12 years turning my father's struggling business into a $75 million empire. Late nights, missed holidays, every ounce of my energy poured into making his dream a reality. So when he leaned back in his chair, smiled and said, "Your brother will take over now," I thought I misheard him. This is a story of loyalty, sacrifice, and the brutal truth about family and business. Before we get into the story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I can still remember the smell of sawdust and metal shavings from my dad's factory when I was a kid. Caldwell Manufacturing wasn't anything fancy back then, just a small shop tucked away in an industrial part of town. The kind of place where the floors were always dusty, the machines roared so loud you had to shout to be heard, and my dad, Robert Caldwell, ruled with a sharp eye and a firm handshake. I grew up in that place. While other kids were out riding bikes or playing video games, I was sitting in my dad's office, watching him balance the books with a calculator that was older than me. He didn't believe in taking shortcuts. If you wanted something, you worked for it. That was his motto. And I wanted his approval more than anything. I was the older brother, the responsible one. Lucas was different. Even as a kid, he had this way of slipping out of responsibility like it was optional. My dad never seemed to mind. He'd shake his head, chuckle, and say, "Lucas will find his way." But me? I wasn't given that kind of leeway. By the time I was 16, I was working summers at the factory, sweeping floors, running deliveries, even learning how to manage inventory. My dad never paid me a dime. "Your payment is experience," he'd say. That was his way of showing love, by teaching me the business, by letting me be part of his world. And I soaked up every second of it. Even then, I knew Caldwell Manufacturing wasn't in great shape. The old clients were drying up, competitors were moving faster, and my dad refused to change. He believed hard work was enough. I believed in him. That belief stuck with me all the way through college. I went to school for business, partly because I loved it, mostly because I wanted to learn how to fix what my dad had built. While my friends were dreaming about Wall Street and six-figure starting salaries, I was writing plans for how to save a company that, on paper, was already on its last legs. When I graduated, I had offers, big ones. Consulting firms, investment banks, all promising a fast track to success. But when my dad called me into his office and said, "I need you here," there wasn't a question in my mind. I turned everything down and came home. Those first few years were brutal. Caldwell Manufacturing was worse off than I'd realized. The machines were outdated, contracts were falling through, and cash flow was barely keeping the lights on. My dad still ran things the old-school way, handshakes over contracts, loyalty over strategy. I worked around the clock, pulling 16-hour days, sometimes sleeping in the office. I modernized operations, cut unnecessary costs, built new partnerships. My dad resisted me at every step, but he never stopped me. And that's how I knew deep down he trusted me. Lucas? He was nowhere to be found. He'd pop in sometimes, flashy ideas and half-baked plans spilling out of him. "We should go digital," he'd say. "Let's get into tech." He was always chasing the next big thing, but he never stuck around long enough to see anything through. While he was jumping between failed startups, I was signing the biggest deal in Caldwell Manufacturing's history. The day we hit $75 million in revenue, I sat in my office and stared at the numbers, trying to process it. I had done it. I had saved my father's company. For the first time, I allowed myself to think, maybe now, he'll see me as more than just the worker behind the scenes. Maybe now, I'll be more than just the son who showed up. I had no idea how wrong I was. Success felt different than I expected. I thought hitting $75 million in revenue would bring some kind of grand moment, my dad pulling me aside, clapping me on the shoulder saying, "You did it, son." Instead, it was quiet. The company was thriving, our employees were getting bonuses for the first time in years, and the factory was running smoother than ever. But my dad? He didn't say much about it. He still came to work every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, still walked the floor with his coffee in hand, still treated me like the kid who used to sweep up metal shavings after hours. Maybe that was just his way. So I stopped waiting for the recognition and focused on what came next. Caldwell Manufacturing could be bigger. We had the momentum, the reputation, and now the capital to expand into new territories. I had plans, real, detailed strategies for growth. I started meeting with investors, researching potential acquisitions, and sketching out the future of the company. Whenever I'd bring it up to my dad, he'd listen, nod here and there, but he never really engaged. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," he'd say. "We've got a good thing going." I told myself he was just being cautious. That after struggling for so long, he didn't want to risk it. I should have looked closer. Because while I was focused on building the future, something was shifting right under my nose. It started small. Lucas started showing up more. At first, it was nothing serious, just him dropping by the office, sitting in on a few meetings. He'd lean back in his chair, arms crossed, throwing out ideas that didn't make sense. "We should diversify our supply chain," he said once, not realizing we already had. I didn't think much of it. Lucas had a pattern. He'd show interest in something, dive in for a few weeks, then lose focus and move on. This felt like just another phase. But my dad? He was different. He lit up whenever Lucas spoke. It didn't matter if the idea was impractical or if he was just repeating something I'd already said, he listened. I'd spent over a decade proving myself, working through nights, sacrificing my personal life. Lucas had been gone for most of it. But suddenly, my dad started acting like he was the missing piece we'd been waiting for. And that's when the real changes began. At first, it was just my dad questioning some of my decisions, nothing major. "Are you sure this is the best move? Maybe we should slow down on expansion." Then, employees started going around me to speak with him. I'd give directives, only to find out later that they had been overruled after talking with Robert. One day, I walked into a meeting I hadn't been invited to. It was a private discussion with the board, something I had always been part of. I only found out because one of my executives let it slip. When I confronted my dad about it, he waved me off. "Just some long-term planning," he said. "Nothing you need to worry about." That was the moment I should have paid attention. But I told myself I was overthinking it. I was the one who built this company back up. I was the one who saved it. My dad would never push me aside. Right? The night of the event, I felt something in my gut. I couldn't place it, just this uneasiness, like something was off. But I chalked it up to nerves. After all, this was supposed to be a celebration. Coldwell Manufacturing had hit $75 million in revenue. We had finally made it. The ballroom was packed with executives, investors, and industry leaders. The kind of people who, just a few years ago, wouldn't have returned our calls. Now they were here shaking our hands, congratulating us, asking about our future plans. I should have been excited. Instead, I felt like I was waiting for something. And then my father stepped onto the stage. He adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat, and smiled. "I want to thank everyone here tonight," he began. "This company has been through a lot. We've fought, we've struggled, and we've come out stronger." A round of applause. I took a sip of my drink, waiting for him to mention me. "And none of this would be possible without my family," he continued. Here it comes, I thought. But then, "That's why I'm proud to announce that my son Lucas will be stepping in as the new CEO of Coldwell Manufacturing." For a second, I didn't react. The words didn't make sense. I actually thought I'd misheard him. Then I saw the crowd, people clapping, smiling, looking at Lucas as he stood up, shaking hands, accepting congratulations like this had been the plan all along. And my dad? He was looking right at me, smiling. I didn't hear anything else he said after that. My ears were ringing. My hands were clenched so tightly around my glass that I thought it might break. Lucas took the stage, giving some effortless speech about new beginnings and honoring tradition, and all I could do was sit there frozen. Because this wasn't just a betrayal. It was a setup. I had spent 12 years killing myself for this company, missing birthdays, holidays, pouring every ounce of energy into making sure it survived. And now, the moment it finally thrived. It was being handed to someone who never earned it. After the speeches, I walked straight past the handshakes, the congratulations, the fake smiles. I found my father in a private room, standing by the bar, pouring himself a drink like it was just another night. "Why?" My voice was shaking. He didn't even flinch. He just exhaled, took a sip of his whiskey, and said, "This was always the plan." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I stared at him, waiting for something, some kind of explanation that made sense, But all he gave me was a calm, steady look, like he had already made peace with this. Like my years of sacrifice didn't matter. Lucas needs this more than you do, he added. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. I needed this. I had built this. And yet, in one sentence, I was erased. I don't remember leaving the event. One moment I was standing there, staring at my father, waiting for him to say something, anything that would make this make sense. The next I was outside, gripping the railing of the hotel balcony, my chest tight, my head pounding. I had given everything to that company. Every late night, every weekend, every missed vacation. I had poured myself into it, not just because I wanted success, but because I thought this was what family meant. And now? I was disposable. I didn't sleep that night. I spent hours replaying every conversation, every decision, every moment where I had assumed my father was preparing me to take over. Had I just been blind? Had I been lying to myself this entire time? I thought about Lucas, about how easily he had stepped into the role like it was his all along. I thought about my father's words. Lucas needs this more than you do. And that was the moment it hit me. This was never about business. This was about my father protecting his golden son. The one who always got a free pass. The one who never had to earn anything. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The next morning, I went into the office before anyone else. I locked myself in my office, pulled up every report, every contract, every document I could find. I needed to know exactly what I was up against. And that's when I started seeing it. Lucas had already begun making decisions, before the announcement, before I even knew what was happening. Reckless hiring. Useless partnerships. Unnecessary expansions. He had been quietly shifting things behind the scenes, and I hadn't even noticed. Because I trusted my father. Because I thought I was secure. At noon, I called an emergency meeting. Only a handful of my senior team showed up. The rest? They were already aligning themselves with Lucas. That's when I realized, this had been happening for months. People were choosing sides. And I had been the last to know. I confronted my father again that evening. I showed him everything. The financial risks. The bad deals Lucas was already making. He barely looked at them. I forced the papers into his hands. Dad, this is a disaster waiting to happen. He sighed, rubbing his temples. You're overreacting. Overreacting. I nearly laughed. Lucas is running this company into the ground, and you're letting him. He set the papers down. Aaron, you've always been strong. You'll be fine. Lucas, he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Lucas needs this. If he fails here, where else does he go? I stared at him. I knew Lucas had failed at every other venture. I knew my father had been covering for him for years. But hearing him admit it out loud, it was like a punch to the gut. This wasn't about who deserved to run the company. This was about who needed saving. And it wasn't me. I spent the next few weeks trying to fight back. I tried reasoning with the board, tried making them see that Lucas was not the right leader. But every door I knocked on was already closed. Lucas had the title. My father had made sure of that. And when the board officially offered me a silent advisory role, I knew what it meant. They wanted me gone. Lucas wanted me gone. And for the first time in my life, I asked myself a question I had never dared to consider. Why am I still fighting for this? I sat in my office long after everyone had gone home. The room felt different now. I looked around at the framed awards, the deal memos, the contracts that had built this company, the company I built. Everything in here was a reminder of what I had sacrificed. And yet, none of it mattered. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't mine. It never was. The next morning, I walked into the boardroom. Lucas was already there, sitting in my seat at the head of the table. He had that same easy grin, the same relaxed posture. He had always been good at acting like he belonged, even when he hadn't earned it. My father was beside him, flipping through some documents like this was just another meeting. I didn't sit down. Instead, I placed my resignation letter on the table. Silence. Lucas raised an eyebrow. What's this? My father set his papers down, finally looking at me. Aaron, he said slowly, like he had been expecting this. Let's not be rash. I let out a breath. I'm done. My father's expression didn't change. He just sighed, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. And what exactly do you plan to do? I met his gaze. I'm starting my own company. Lucas let out a short laugh, shaking his head. That's cute. I ignored him. I built Coldwell Manufacturing into what it is. The clients, the contracts, the relationships, those were mine. I didn't do this for a name, Dad. I did this because I loved this business. I turned to Lucas. You think wearing a title makes you a leader? Let's see what happens when you actually have to run this company without me. His smirk faltered. Because he knew. He knew he couldn't do what I did. He knew that deep down, he wasn't ready for this. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I turned, walking out without another word. I didn't leave alone. In the days that followed, the people who had truly built Coldwell Manufacturing followed me. The best employees. The most loyal clients. The smartest investors. They didn't stay for the Coldwell name. They stayed because they believed in me. Lucas, of course, tried to stop it. He had the legal team send threats, tried to block me from taking certain clients. But there was one thing he couldn't change. Trust. You can't buy it. You can't fake it. You have to earn it. And I had. Within a year, my new company was thriving. Meanwhile, Coldwell Manufacturing? It was falling apart. Lucas had no idea what he was doing. His reckless spending, his bad hires, his desperate decisions, they were killing the business. The same board members who had once backed him were now scrambling to fix his mistakes. And my father? For the first time in his life, he had to face something he had never considered. He had picked the wrong son. The call came late one evening. I saw my father's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. I picked up. Silence, at first. Then, a quiet, strained voice. The company's in trouble. I didn't say anything. Lucas, he's not handling things well. His voice was heavier than I had ever heard it. ***, we need help, Aaron. He wasn't just calling as a father. He was calling as a businessman who had made a terrible decision. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. 12 years. 12 years of my life, my energy, my sweat and blood, given freely. And in the end, I had been nothing more than a backup plan. I took a slow breath. Then, I said the words I never thought I'd say. Not my problem. And I hung up.